I'm Hasanawa Kabago. I'll be reporting about the history and the national goals and objectives of the Republic of Mali.
Bonjour, I am Hosanna Kunicha and I will be discussing about educational system special features of the country of Mali.
Bonjour, my name is Naranika Omar. I will be discussing about the issues and concerns in Mali.
Bonjour! My name is Maridel Mugot and I will be discussing the solutions and initiatives in Mali.
Bonjour, I am Alan Paul V. Pavilian and I will be discussing the comparative analysis of Mali.
Mali, which means where the king lives, was once home to several pre-colonial empires, one of the largest countries in Western Africa. Join me this morning to discover how Mali rises, struggles to stand the test of time, refuses to fall into the ashes of history. Mali is a landlocked country in West Africa. Mali is the eighth largest country in Africa with an area of just over 1,240,000 square kilometers. The population of Mali is 14.5 million and the capital is Bamako. About half the population lives below the international poverty line of $1.25 a day. A majority of the population, 55%, are non-denominational Muslims. Mali was once part of the three Western African empires that controlled the trans-Saharan trade: the Ghana Empire, the Mali Empire, and the Songhay Empire. The Kingdom of Mali had its origin on the upper Niger River in the 11th century. Mali expanded rapidly west to the Atlantic Ocean, south deep into the forest, east beyond the Niger River, north to the salt and copper mines of the Sahara. The most significant of the Mali kings was Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was a devout Muslim who built magnificent mosques all throughout Mali. It was under Mansa Musa that Timbuktu became one of the major cultural centers not only of Africa but of the entire world. Under Musa's patronage, vast libraries were built as well as madrasa. After the death of Mansa Musa, the power of Mali began to decline. In the late 19th century, during the scramble for Africa, France seized control of Mali, making it a part of French Sudan. French Sudan, then known as the Sudanese Republic, joined with Senegal in 1959, achieving independence in 1960 as the Mali Federation. Following Senegal's withdrawal from the Federation, the Sudanese Republic declared itself the Independent Republic of Mali. After a long period of one-party rule, a 1991 coup led the writing of a new constitution and the establishment of Mali as a democratic multi-party state. Malians have a great pride in their ancestry and culture. After a long struggle for independence and finally emancipated itself from colonizers, this is now Mali, still fighting for political stability and peace. Once appreciated for over 20 years of democratic stability, Mali's crisis of 2012 highlighted the governmental institutions' fragility. This urges the United Nations to intervene and promote the following national goals. First, increase capacity to protect its borders, secure its population, counter violent extremist organizations, and combat trafficking threats. Mali's population sees significant advances in socio-economic conditions, strides in economic development and improvement in its business environment. Third, through promotion of U.S. values and cultivation of diversified partnerships, Mali experiences strengthened democratic institutions, responsive governance, and respect for human rights. To protect and improve the lives of its citizens, Mali drafted a Millennium Development Goals that were aimed to achieve between 1990 and 2015. First developmental goal: eradicating extreme poverty and hunger in Mali. Mali is doing very poorly on this goal. 72.5% of Mali's populations still making less than $1 a day. The goal is to have the amount of people making less than that by the year 2015. Goal number 2. Achieve universal primary education in Mali. Mali has made a great strides in providing elementary education to all, although the literacy rate of 15 to 24 years old have dropped from 27% in 1990 to just over 24% in 2004. The net enrollment of the students in primary education nearly doubled between 1990 and 2000. Goal number 3. Promoting gender equality in Mali. The percentage of seats held by women in parliament in 1997 was at 2.3%. In 2000, it had jumped to 12.2%, and in 2006, it had fallen back down to 10.2%. However, we can say that Mali has made a significant effort to equalize the gender differences. Goal number 4. Reducing child mortality in Mali. The infant mortality rate has also been steadily declining from 140 deaths per live birth to only 121. This great progress, Mali is striving towards and has had success in reducing the child and infant mortality rate in the country. Although for a while Mali was making a great progress towards improving maternal health, the statistics are nearly back to where they originally started. In 1995, it dropped nearly in half to only 630. This is great progress, however, it had jumped back up to the original 1,200 by the year 2000. Goal number 6. Combating HIV/AIDS, malaria, and other diseases in Mali. The percentage of people living with HIV dropped from 1.9% in 2001 to 1.7% in 2004. Goal number 7. Ensuring environmental stability in Mali. This goal includes providing safe drinking water to the people. The millennial goal was to have the proportion of people without the access to safe drinking water, and Mali had nearly met that in 2004. Goal number 8. Dealing with the national debt of Mali. This millennial goal also includes measuring the population's technological advances. In 1995, 3 out of 100 people in Mali use a personal computer. In 2004, that number had jumped to 38. Although not very much debt is mentioned in Mali's statistics, they have seen some great advances in technology that will put them ahead in the future. That's the end of my report. Good morning, and thank you for watching.
Bonjour, I am Hosanna Kunicha and I will be discussing about educational system special features of the country of Mali. Mali has an underdeveloped educational system ascribed to limited funding. In fact, Mali is among the lowest levels of school attendance in the world, especially in the rural areas wherein the attendance rate is only 30%. It means that only 3 out of 10 children attend to school. When Mali was still under the rule of France, that's for 68 years to note, when they were still supervised by French Navy and when their school was previously known as Schools of Hostages and was then renamed as School for Sons of Chiefs, they had a two-cycle system. The first cycle, which is known as the primary education, lasts for 6 years. Yet, most, if not all, had a hard time because the medium of instruction used during those times was French, and only a few Malian know how to use this language, especially those from rural areas who have a little or no knowledge or experience at all about the French language. And as a result, Malians had a low literacy rate. For additional information, until now, only 5 to 10% of the total Malian populace know how to speak the French language. Even if this is their national language, and even if this is the medium used in public institutions. As said, they had a two-cycle system. After the first cycle, the second cycle is equally divided into 2 parts. That's 3 years each. After the first cycle, students need to take the qualifying exam, which is called the DEF exam, for them to proceed in secondary education. And after 6 years in secondary education, another qualifying exam, which is called as the baccalaureate exam, is required for the students to take if they want to enroll in tertiary education. To note, the country of Mali had a limited higher education institution, and the well-known university is called as the University of Mali. Mali, like other countries, strive to improve their educational system one step at a time, amidst the academic constraints they're currently facing. Now, the government had merged the 2 cycles into one, considering that the qualifying exams need to be remained. Now they have free and compulsory basic education. For 9 years, students between 7 to 16 years old are required to attend to school from October to June. Hence, it is their fundamental right. Yet, even with this opportunity, Mali still has a low enrollment rates because lots of families still cannot afford to buy basic expenses like school supplies and others. Also, the literacy rates in Mali range from 30% to 46.4%, where 47% is to male and 31% is to female. As you can see, comparing the literacy rates of the two gender, male has a higher literacy rates compared to female. In fact, 900,000 Malian children aged 7 to 12, most of them are girls, are out of school. This is because of gender inequality, where most girls end up marrying at a young age. The good thing is that Mali has public schools, private schools, tertiary and higher institutions, Islamic institutions, which are also called as the madrasas, community education, wherein these schools are flexible enough to cater the needs of a specific community, education for the deaf. It is because the country of Mali has a large population of deaf. Therefore, the government created opportunities for their students and vocational and technical education, wherein after primary school, Malians can optionally attend vocational and technical schools which provide pre-professional certificates. And that ends my report. Please stay with us because there's a lot more about Mali.
Hi everyone, I am Nurhanifa Omar. The next discussant, I will be discussing about the issues and concern in Malay. Issues and concern in education in Malay. Malay has one of the highest adult illiteracy rate in the world with 52% of the male and 66.8% of the female being illiterate. Education is free and compulsory for all children between 7 and 16 years old. Only 71% of the boys and 51% enrolled high school as families were unable to afford uniform, books, or school supplies. The lack of school in rural areas and qualified teachers is a major problem of Malay's educational system. In 2003, only 36% of the students completed primary school, most of them dropping out around 12 years old. The quality of education is poor. In 2010, the government estimates that 35% of the children graduating from primary school will not meet the secondary school requirements. The gender inequality is greater in Malay, particularly in rural areas. Public schools are free, but private secondary school and vocational schooling can go up to $500 a year, which the average year salary in Malay. It is the basis for increasing inequalities between rich and poor. What needs to be done in Mali is reform the educational system to develop a relevant publicly supported curriculum. On the donor side, it is imperative to increase the quality of education by forming more teachers and revising the program. Decentralizing education seems to be the best approach to reach the diverse communities and tackle regional inequalities. To address the financial management and the monitoring of the teaching, a community-based approach has proven to be very efficient as in Madagascar. The involvement of the civil society tend to bring a higher enrollment of children and limit corruption. It is also ensure teaching more adapted to the pupils, especially in the case of Mali that has such a great diversity of tribes and culture. A system of tutoring and help group practice using older students as tutors could be tested on the model of the traditional functioning patterns of village communities. Ultimately, schools should become compulsory for all children to give equal chances to all in life. On the demand side, it is needed to create enough incentive and adopt cost-efficient strategies to increase the attendance. Offering free uniforms, lunch at school, and primary health care as vaccines or deworm medicines have a double impact, increasing attendance as well as improving nutrition and health of the students. To tackle the gender inequity, bringing women teachers in the scholar system, increase girls' enrollment as well as the number of girls students graduating. Scholarship for girls to continue their studies will also help to reduce the gender gap and create an incentive for family to send the girls to school. Teaching in the dialect of the region also dramatically increase the result in school. It ensures a better quality of teaching and response from the students. Malay conflict profile. Malay faces many challenges in the context of a political, security, socio-economic, and humanitarian crisis, which is affecting much of the Sahel region. In particular, it is seeking to build on the terms of 2015 peace denial aimed at ending the armed conflict in its northern region, which began in 2012. This began when a loose coalition of armed political and religious groups attacked Malayan government forces stationed in the north of the country. They took control of a large amount of territory, proclaiming the establishment of an unrecognized state of Azawad. A French-led military operation later re-established control over this territory. The UN MINUSMA mission is now supporting the development of a political process to build lasting peace in a country which has seen several other periods of armed conflict. But violence continues and there have been renewed clashes with the army in northern Mali, as well as incidents such as the Bamako hotel attack. Deep-seated issues of poverty, poor governance, trafficking, corruption, and a worsening food crisis have fueled the conflict, from which thousands of people have now fled. Many are living in refugee camps in Burkina Faso and Niger. Since Malay's independence in 1960, Malay has had 4 significant rebellions. These rebellions have left Malay in perpetual political, humanitarian, and social conflict. The most recent conflict occurred in 2012 and continued today as the international community works to combat the many issues hindering Malay from achieving sustainable peace. The fact that foreign intervention is needed and that there have been numerous uprisings raises 4 critical questions. These are the 4 significant rebellions. First, the cause of conflict: political, economic, and security problems. Next, corruption in Malay. The next one is rebel activity in Malay. Next is the economic condition in Malay. Major challenges to peace building in Malay. The humanitarian crisis has been a significant challenge to peace building in Malay. While it is true that the former Malayan government created some of the crisis, it is also environmental. The 1970s and 1980s brought with them a severe drought that made growing crops difficult and created a food crisis. As a region whose economy is heavily dependent on livestock and agriculture, conditions were worse for northerners in Malay. This crisis motivated people in the north to migrate to other nations where economic and living conditions might be better, but many soon returned because they were forced out due to worsening conditions in those other countries. Thank you so much.
In 2012, violence erupted in northern Mali, affecting the sub-region. Fearing for their lives, tens of thousands were forced to flee their homes to escape the conflict. Years went by. A peace deal was signed in Mali, but the fighting didn't stop. Crime, terrorism, chronic droughts, and limited access to food and medical care persist in Mali. Today, significant numbers of internally displaced Malians and refugees hosted in neighboring countries are still unable to return home. Roughly a quarter of refugees live in towns and cities. The farmers, herders, merchants, and nomads that make up most of the remaining 75% live in settlements.
Mali is among the 10th poorest country. Today, more than ever, the country is in need of big ideas to take the country forward. Good morning, everyone. I am Maridel Mugot. Today, I will be talking about the solutions and initiatives in Mali. As discussed by our first reporter, Mali has its 8 developmental goals from 1990 to 2015, namely, eradicating extreme poverty and hunger, achieve a universal primary education, promoting gender equality, reducing child mortality, improving maternal health, combating HIV/AIDS, malaria, and other diseases, ensuring environmental stability, and dealing with national debt. However, headlines about Mali often focus on conflict and security concerns. But these stories are uncertain to the reality for people living through a 6-year-long crisis. With over 130,000 refugees already in neighboring countries, more than 1 million people inside Mali are now in urgent need of health assistance. Why? The conflict is splintering. Numerous armed groups, the Malian army, and criminal gangs are all present, as well as an increasing number of foreign troops. In many areas, health workers have fled or are unable to go to work, and health facilities are abandoned. Children go unvaccinated, and common illnesses like malaria and diarrhea can prove fatal. Why? People cannot move freely. Families contend with conflict and criminality on the roads as they seek medical care and food. NGOs face similar challenges, risking robberies of aid and attacks on staff. In isolated communities, malnutrition is at critical levels, with over 15% of children acutely malnourished, while women give birth far from medical health. Why? People don't know who to trust. Military actors occasionally deliver aid in order to gain the trust of the community. Imagine if aid was delivered to you by a mixture of military and humanitarian groups. How would you know who to trust? Humanitarian aid by the European Civil Protection and Humanitarian Aid provided more than 362 million euros since the beginning of the crisis in 2012 and is currently a major donor of assistance in the country. In 2020, this aid amounts to 29.6 million euros. The European humanitarian aid in Mali helps respond to the food crisis triggering by conflict, drought, the difficult period between harvests, and high food prices. Whenever a conflict triggers a mass displacement of people, the European-funded aid organizations operating in Mali are equipped to react rapidly and provide vulnerable people with emergency shelter, food assistance, access to clean water and health protection, and the basic essential items. In addition, the European-funded projects provide education for children who can no longer go to school because of the unfolding humanitarian crisis. Unfortunately, humanitarian agencies are facing significant challenges in availing life-saving interventions to the affected populations, as the raging conflict coupled with kidnappings have rendered access to the affected communities difficult. Another challenge in Mali is the mounting pressure for land ownership. Everyone is talking about land, who's trying to get it, and the game playing in urban and peri-urban areas. Land titles and tenure policy used to be subjects for policy wonks only, but now, land titles are on everyone's lips. The rush to get a title on land has caused such problems that the government suspended all further issues of titles. While this provides breathtaking space to try and establish a more credible system, demands for land are stacking up. A new Loi Foncière Agricole (LFA) or Agricultural Land Law was debated in the National Assembly. This law introduces innovative new methods such as local commissions foncières to register land possessions and transactions and address land conflicts. There is great hope that the LFA will offer greater security to those who risk losing their land and homes. But there's growing concern about widening inequality and growing numbers of poor, landless people. Mali is currently in a crucial phase of decentralization. Aiming to improve the efficiency and the democratic legitimacy of public action in the long term, the Mali government has adopted a national strategy to consolidate decentralization and initiated extensive reforms for legal affairs and administration. To achieve this, the government has transferred numerous competencies to Mali's local authorities, the regions, districts, and municipalities. These authorities are now faced with the task of assuming responsibility in the political process. To do this, however, they first need to expand their institutional, administrative, and human resources. Real decentralization would bring huge benefits, reducing pressures on land, transport, and housing around the capital and building more effective institutions across the region. Security and conflict concerns in Mali were being tried to address with a peace treatment in June 2015. The agreement seeks to restore peace in Mali, principally through a process of decentralization or regionalization, reconstituting a national army from the members of the former armed groups that were signatories, and boosting the economy, particularly in the north, based on dialogue, justice, and national reconciliation. However, there has been all this discontentment of the Malians with the leadership of their president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keita. As to why is the government not being able to address these issues when there has been a peace agreement that was signed in 2015 between the government and some of these different rebel movements in other parts of the country that has not been fully implemented. There's a lot of dissatisfaction with the way the government is handling things, and that's why a rebellion was made in August 2020. There have been protests for months. Mali has been gripped with months of anti-government protests, with many accusing Keita's administration of corruption and incompetence. Mali's unpopular president, Ibrahim Boubacar Keita, was removed on August 18, 2020 by the military in a swift and bloodless coup, and many Malians celebrated. Keita's ouster came after years of corruption, mismanagement, and failed promises. Credible allegations of fraud and election-related violence further fueled popular anger after a contested parliamentary vote in March. After his ouster, there was a veritable jubilee among the citizen protesters who had demonstrated since June to demand Keita's resignation. They flocked to the streets holding signs reading, "This isn't a coup, it's a revolution," and "Mission accomplished." Overthrowing a corrupt leader is an easy fix for the moment, but history shows the price is almost always political and economic instability, and usually another military coup. This time around, the people of Mali will be hoping for a smoother transition of power, but is still unclear just to who that power will be handed to. That ends my report. Thank you so much for watching, and please stand by for the next reporter.
Good morning. I am Alan Paul V. Pavilian, the next discussant, and I will be discussing to you the comparative analysis of the countries presented.
In general, the educational system in Mali has a number of serious problems that the country is trying to address with help from the World Bank and other national and international organizations. The Mali educational system is highly inefficient because of high-grade repetitions and dropout rates. With this, the quality of education is often poor because of the lack of textbooks and other instructional materials, and because of poor initial training and continuing education of teachers. In addition, there are insufficient resources allocated to education. Thus, schools are managed centrally by the government. School administration needs to be decentralized, and parents need to be better informed and more involved in the schools. Despite the government's ongoing efforts and existing education sector initiatives, there are important challenges persist related to the quality of education delivered, equity, and the overall management of the sector. A 2017 sectoral evaluation noted that Mali continues to have some of the lowest education indicators in the region. The key issues in the education sector remains inadequate and inequitable access to the full cycle of basic education, particularly for girls and poor populations. Low education quality is shown by limited low learning outcomes and weak governance of the sector. However, the poor performance of Mali's education sector continues to directly relate to funding shortages and weaknesses in the public management. While the government carries the burden in the funding the operating expenditures, donors still play a very important role in supporting capital investment, especially at the basic level. There were unfinished access agenda in Mali. In 2015 to 2016, the primary education gross enrollment rate and the completion rate have reached 77% and 58% respectively. In addition, an estimated 1.9 million primary school-aged children are not in school, which represent nearly 40% of the primary school-aged population by the year 2015 to 2016. This data from 2015 to 2016 academic year clearly indicate that the current situation is still way far from the universal coverage, particularly in basic education, which remains compulsory for all, as well as the sharp decline in performance. In comparison to the gross enrollment rates that were much higher before the crisis, both demand and supply factors explain this high rate of out-of-school population, such as an affordable cost of education to households, long distances to school, poor quality of physical facilities, high repetition, and lack of parental interest or perception that the existing education system does not lead to a job. Furthermore, high rates of chronic malnutrition and low access to early childhood education means that children also enter school poorly prepared. As a result, learning outcomes are low and the poor quality of education provided is insufficient to compensate. Mali educational system is building on its resilience since 2015. The government introduced a reform of the education sector in line with the Sustainable Development Goals or SDG. This reform underlies the long-awaited education sector plans and its 10 years education sectoral development program, second generation, for the 2019 to 2028, with the ultimate objectives of improving the quality of education delivery through a revamping of the education sector as a whole. The program covers all the levels of education, from early childhood to basic education to tertiary education, and aims to improve access and quality and enhance the governance of the education system. Gender is the corresponding theme of the program and would be a key element of this project. This program is being supported by all of the relevant education stakeholders, including the donor community. The level of funding needed continues to be very high compared to the current capacity. In conclusion, the problems of Mali are the problems of most less developed countries. These countries are characterized by rampant poverty, lack of basic infrastructure and services, weak institutions, heavy dependence on primary commodities for export, and limited technical skills.
And that's the end of my report, and I hope that you will gain knowledge about Mali, the underdeveloped countries, with its brief historical background, national goals and objectives, educational structure, special features, issues and concerns, solutions and initiatives, and comparative analysis of the country presented. Well, my dear dope mates, as we end our group report, we will have a short finale. And now let's come and join us as we sing the Mali song.
We're 10 regions of Mali, it's nice to meet ya. Mali's the 8th largest country within Africa. We're 10 regions of Mali, in the northwest we be. We have a capital named Bamako that you will see. We're 10 regions of Mali, it's nice to meet ya. Mali's the 8th largest country within Africa. We're 10 regions of Mali, in the northwest we be. We have a capital named Bamako that you will see.